Good afternoon and welcome to the Dissenting Goyim Show, episode 9, brought to you by Dyed in the Wool History Productions. And we are here after a brief hiatus, a couple of weeks, just trying to make things work. And we are here to bring you where we left, or to talk about where we left off at, which was Iran and the conflict over there, and how it has truly evolved into a regional war, just as they had suspected, as the analysts and the political analyzers outside of the military analysts have initially said it is going to be a regional war. There's going to be more than just America and Iran. It is going to involve everyone else around them. Anywhere else that an American base is, it's going to be a problem. Israel doing what they're doing, it's a problem. And there was a chance of Iran having help from Russia, China, and now we are looking at North Korea in a way. And so we have to kind of talk about a lot of the logistics here that are involved with this, because it's not just a war. It's not something that we expect to go in, bomb, regime change. It has a lot more meaning to it. And what is that? That meaning happens to fall down to what is on the patch of the IDF soldiers, which is the Greater Israel Project. Now, a lot of people look at that and say, that's fairly new ideology. It had to have been established, within the past decade or so. And if they do think further back than that, they think back to the founding of Israel, which was done by a bunch of people who definitely weren't any way, shape, or form practicing Jewish followers, or as we want to say, Orthodoxy Jew, or anything near that. They were people who were Jewish by name because they were Khazar from Eastern Europe, wanting the prophecy. And so when we look at the people that want the title of Jewish people, now they're not blood. There's no blood involved in this. You either are Hebrew or you are not. Believing in the Jewish faith does not make you Hebrew. It does not make you special. It just makes you someone who follows a large denomination, which is one of the big three religions in this world that have, done more than others, and we say have done a little extra establishing themselves, right? So the question is, where and when did this ideology start to show up? The Greater Israel Project, the bringing of the Messiah, the establishing the kingdom of heaven on earth. And who is the Messiah? We could ask that question, but we have to look back. It goes far. It goes further back than most people would think of, and the reason why is because they aren't historically inclined, or they aren't really taught to make those connections. We don't teach cause to effect, effect to cause, and move that cycle forward till we get to where we are today. Now, this boils down to what happened with the East India companies within the mid 17th century, when that's 1650 for those of you that don't really understand the mid 17th or 16th or 18th century. We could just say if it's mid 17th century, we're looking at 1650, right? And that's how it is. You every time they say 18, or if they say 18th, you count down to 17. If they say 19th, you count down to 18. So here we are in the mid 1600s or the mid 17th century, right? The battle over the East Indies was coming to an end, right? The Dutch East India, not I don't want to call them Dutch, but that's what the company's called. The merchants, however, were not. They were all Jewish merchants. That's what they called them. They were Jewish merchants. They were people who prescribed not to the standard Old Testament that that Christians see, or that the Orthodoxy Jew sees. They subscribe to the Talmudic writings, and that's the extra biblical writings, the ones of the people trying to say this is what this is meant here, and so this is how we establish our order, and it's all done behind closed doors. They never ever translate this so people can read it, and it does get translated. It got translated for some kind of dissenter, but regardless, these merchants wore Talmudic Jews. They were following that, and they had long established the idea that if they control the East Indies, which the Jewish merchants have since the 9th century BC, they've been moving goods from Spain to Baghdad, right, to the East Indies there, and even up to China and back down. They controlled that entire international ocean way. Not international, sorry, just interglobal or transglobal ocean highway. They have moved goods, and where they started or where they stopped from, they went from from China to East Indies to Baghdad there, moved around, went anywhere they needed to through Alexandria, and then to Bordeaux, France, which is kind of where they had their home base, right? And with them in that group was the English East Indies, right? So you had two East India companies, and they were both at this time together, and they started venturing out, and they established their own messiahs. The idea that they were to bring forth the new millennium, the rule of the messianic rule, and so we call it the age of the messianic age. Sorry, and you have people like Sabbatai Zevi. You have people like Jacob Frank. Jacob Frank right now is the premier belief of the Rothschilds. He is the guy that kind of set that in stone and moved forward and meshed all that together as the Rothschilds started, collecting the Masons and collecting the Illuminati, because we know that Jacob Frank and Adam Weishaupt and Mayer Amschel Rothschild were very close, and he funded both groups there, right? And so we give birth to this idea called Zionism. Back then, that was proto-Zionism. Now, today, we talk about Zionism. The question when it comes to Zionism is, what is Zionism, right? A lot of people don't really understand what that is. And if we ask that dude from Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, who gives all of us with bloodlines that tie through Arkansas very, very bad names, very bad images, because even his daughter went and said, we are investing in Israel, right? And I don't know where she was looking at. She had one eye looking that way, the other eye looking somewhere else. But he called Zionism just a belief that Israel should be able to live as a free country and enjoy the, we could say the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, so to speak, in the international world. Now, ironically, right, is that Israel is denying those rights to everybody, even the average goyim here in America, right, because they've their financiers are Jewish. The Rothschilds are Jewish. The home loans, everything we do pays a Jew in some way, shape, or form, and we need to understand that and walk away from this stuff. But the question is, right, what is Zionism? Because as of right now, and we are looking at Tel Aviv on fire, we're looking at America bombing school children twice, not once, twice. And so I now pose the question to you, James the Elder, who is by far the premier scholar on this topic, is what is Zionism? Where does it come from, right? How do we look at the weirdos like Theodore Herzl, who was into I think he was into child sacrifice, if I'm not mistaken, right? And you look at Elazar ben Yehuda, who said, I hate everything about the Jewish belief except for the prophecy. And so when I make this language we call the New Hebrew language, it will be westernized. And that was all done and paid for by the head of the Rothschild family at the time, Edmund de Rothschild, I believe his name was. I could be wrong. But he definitely did fund that. So, James the Elder, what is Zionism, and where did it start, and how do we move forward with this deal?
Zionism really, there are two answers to the question. The theological answer started, I'll say, pretty much around the time of the Puritans and Sabbatini Zevi, which is a belief in that biblical prophecy called for the Jewish people, whatever they may be, or to be returned to the Holy Land prior to the second coming of Christ. So this is something that would bring about the millennium. The interest of the Jewish people in that was probably not as intense as it was in the the Puritans and other enthusiast groups in England at the time, not long after the Reformation came to England from the continent.
Now let's stop though, real quick.
Yeah.
Who were the Puritans, right? And why do they fit in? I know that we can call them second-rate Jews in a way, right? But where do they tie in?
Well, they're
Why
from
is it that
East Anglia specifically. Very clear statistical alignment there. They were a merchant people. They were very quick to adapt Reformed theology. And a key point about Reformed theology, as opposed to Lutheranism, Calvin had rejected the Catholic concept of usury laws. Luther did not. Did that play into why they were Calvinists instead of Lutherans? Quite possibly. Because they were merchant people, they were limited on what the return they could get on capital. So they really wanted out of those laws. They interacted a lot with the exiled Jewish population in Antwerp and Amsterdam. I think their millennial fever actually triggered it in the Jews. So during the English Reformation, the Puritans and the other groups like them were very interested in bringing about the second coming, the end of history. The Jews in Amsterdam and Antwerp became aware of that and started playing off each other. One author referred to them as like two basketball players fast breaking down the court on the road to the millennium. That was E. Michael Jones. I thought that was kind of a cute analogy. Then after the Puritans, they took power in England with the English Civil War under Cromwell. They killed almost half the people in Ireland because they were Catholic and they had too many kids. They when the Stuarts came back into power there, which was kind of ironic because they sought Jewish financing to raise an army to come back and kick Cromwell out. The English people had like 100 years of millennial fever, and they were sick of it. The monarchy was welcome as really kind of a liberator. Cromwell, who had died shortly before that, was unearthed, and his body hung in effigy, his corpse hung. Then the millennial fever really seemed to pass heavily into the Jews in the New Netherlands area. And a factor that led into that, Poland was the Jewish homeland. And they had very positive words about it. Poland was a kingdom for a while. It collapsed, or it was parted out by Russia and the Ottomans and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is how the Russians wound up with a large Jewish population. These were Ashkenazi Jews, but they were Eastern European. They're really, regardless of what theory people have on where they came from exactly, they're really very different from the Germanic Jews. And that was at the time of, say, 1800, that was 80% of the Jewish population in the world. And it was also the heart of revolutionary communism. So that's one form of that led to the political form of Zionism.
now? Real quick, I'm sorry.
What's that?
Let's go here to Poland. Right? Is that it was always kind of the center of these messianic movements, right? Is that after?
No, not entirely. Zevi was an Ottoman Jew, but there was a real messianic fever amongst the Sephardic Jews in the Netherlands too.
Right. Yeah, they were that push for messianic. But what about Jacob Frank though? He was from that area and then moved to the.
He was from there. So there got to be a flow of people from Jews from Poland into Germany and then eventually on into America. So Jacob Frank was originally from there. I understand he was an unusually large, handsome, and strong man with a charismatic personality. He claimed to be Sabatini Zevi and the biblical character Aaron reincarnated. He made his center of gravity around Frankfurt, which was also the home of the Illuminati movement, the Jesuits, and Freemasonry. Well, Freemasonry technically started in London, but it had the seeds for it there too. And the Rothschilds were centered there, and he took an interest in Frank. And Frank, who was born wealthy, lost most of what he had, but then the wealth returned to him, probably through the Rothschild Association. So you had all these kind of toxic actors in the same place at the same time. They were outlawed in Germany and other places in Europe, but the thinking is that they transferred their vision into the Mason lodges. And there were a lot of different types of Mason lodges, but they became basically the conductor for the Illuminati philosophy.
Okay. Now let's look at, because you talked about the doctrinal beginning of that. Now let's go back to the kind of political. Where did that tie in as far as start to get absorbed politically? And we can talk, we can mull around the idea of the Masons being involved, right? Or not Masons, but kind of where all that came into the political strong arm, so to speak, of this group. But where did it start to tie in politically?
Well, that becomes labor Zionism. So you had this outflowing of Jews from what was now Russia around, as really right at the end of the 1800s. It's generally associated with pogroms, which is mob violence against Jews following the assassination of Tsar Alexander II in 1881. But you didn't have that many people leaving until 1897, when the Russian government, trying to deal with the alcoholism and debt problems, nationalized the production of vodka. And vodka was a Jewish industry. In fact, liquor in general was distilling it, selling it, and loaning money to people to buy it, and other things. Consumer loans, basically what we would later call loan sharking. The sugar was also a Jewish industry, which was tied closely to alcohol production. And when it became clear in 1897 that wasn't going to be repealed, that's when you really saw the massive outflow of people into England to a degree, but especially into America. And interestingly, when they had to cross Germany, the Jews in Germany helped them, helped their co-religionists, but they did not want them to stay there. They transferred them across Germany in sealed railroad cars.
They transferred the Ashkenazi.
They transferred the Eastern European Jews across Germany in sealed railroad cars.
Now, at what point then, right, is why do the Germanic Jews not like them? And when they met up with the Sephardic Jews, right, how did they start building this? Or I guess, did they ever build a relationship? And where did
a little bit, but they never really liked them right from the beginning. The Jews in Amsterdam really did not want the Ashkenazi to come into their area, because they'd achieved a social status that was, they're basically unencumbered, and they were economically very powerful. They did not want to have this very conspicuous Jewish population settle there amongst them, because they thought it would bear badly for themselves. So the Ashkenazi Jews from Eastern Europe, they were actually, they tended to be they're religious, ascetic. They looked different. They sounded different. They spoke Yiddish. They were very, very conspicuous. And the Jews in Germany and the Sephardic Jews, or the places, really didn't want them. And England didn't want them either. The Dracula movie, you sent me something on that, a Dracula story, was really based around what was the Ashkenazi Jewish immigration problem at the time.
Yeah, that was Yeah, that was on Cato, his
Yeah.
Substack. That was interesting. It's interesting the idea that it's even, a lot of people are kind of want to get mad at you for saying it's like, well, this group needs to leave, right? The same thing with the United, here and those the finances, they need to leave, they need to go, we need to get rid of them. And we could, they try to make the cases, oh, that's anti-Semitic, this and that, but it's funny because here at this moment you have the German Jews not wanting them, right? You want that, and they were problematic to them, and obviously that had to come down to economic reasoning too. But it's like they were a problem, and it's kind of like keep on moving, stay out of here.
Oh, when they New York became their center of gravity, and of course that's where Trotsky became prominent. But U.S. didn't really have a communist movement until they came there. That was the center of gravity for American communism. They were Bolsheviks. That's really the underlying problem of the people that came out of what was then Russia. They were either separatist Jews who were religious, or they were Marxists. They were Bolsheviks.
Okay. Okay, so they are the separatists. The same, I guess same thing what you could say with the early Puritan groups, huh? You had the separatists, and then you had the.
Well, they spoke their own language. They really their only interface with the Goyim population was liquor and usury.
And yeah. Now, when you go back to Amsterdam on that train ride out of Germany, right? Did they stop there ish, or was that?
The idea was to have as few of them stop as possible. There wasn't a big interest in Bolshevism at that time amongst the Sephardic Jews. So it's kind of interesting amongst the different Jewish populations. You had the ultra capitalist on one hand, and then you had the Marxist revolutionaries on the other.
Did the two hands work together at all in this moment?
Not too directly, no. At some level, there might have been a strategic understanding of how you get kind of a Galilean dialectic going there, but I would say not directly. A lot of the Jewish Bolsheviks thought they get more of a Gentile following than they actually got, but the problem was they were very different, and people just didn't like them.
What? Well, I guess we kind of all know the reason why, but maybe let's map this out for someone that may not know the reason why. Why would people from the Goyim to other Jewish factions not like this particular faction?
Well, in Russia, there had been at least 200 in the Pale of Settlement. There had been at least 200 years of animosity. One of the biggest reasons the peasant populations were in debt up to their eyes to the Jewish moneylenders. They spoke a different language. They didn't interact very much other than money lending and borrowing. Um, and a basic factor too is amongst the peasants in Russia, even if they drank too much, they were fundamentally Christian, and that was a barrier. They weren't going to become Bolsheviks because of the rejection of Christianity.
Okay.
So some of them did, but not many.
Yeah, not many, right? Now it's this fundamental thing about Bolshevik is just it's nihilistic in its core, right? You have to
Yeah,
deny
well,
that, right?
it is
At the
inherently
time,
nihilistic and inherently atheistic. It
yeah,
took
and
it took the Jewish messianism that stayed, but any sort of concept of God left, other than collective man. So that became not atheistic and nihilistic.
okay. Now let's peel it back, right? So we look at this meshing now, and I kind of before we move on to trying to talk about Iran and the war itself. If we look at now the tying in, you have the Ted Cruzes of this world. You have the the people in Texas, supplying red heifers to this group, right? Do we tie in Zionism with its core down to Jacob Frank, and where the tie-in comes? Do we tie it in through dispensationalism when we start to bring connecting the kind of the Jewish Messiah, believe in them, they're the way, the truth, and the life, with with essentially, I guess, with the Christians, right?
Well,
Um,
it really started a little bit earlier than that. Amongst the Puritans, they were certainly Zionists, but their eschatology was progressive millennialism, which was very similar to the Jewish concept of tikkun olam, where they believe that they have to improve society enough to usher in the second coming. It wasn't dependent on man or God, excuse me. It was dependent on man. Now, with dispensationalism, you had something different, where the rapture, tribulation, so forth, comes a lot across from an act of God, not man, but the gathering together of the Jews in the Holy Land was a precursor event. Now, you have to start thinking at this time with this dispensationalism. Did dispensationalism start to look like reality, or was dispensationalism crafted to look like reality? That's a fundamental question.
okay, so yeah, there's a fundamental question, right? What would your assessment be of this? You are, I would say,
Yeah, I would say it was definitely crafted to look like reality, especially when you get into the pop dispensationalism of the 1950s, 60s, 70s, especially where you had the biblical prophecy crafted carefully around current events. It wasn't the first time that had happened. That there were examples of that in the 1850s, which is how Russia became Gog in this sort of thinking. But at this time, the pop dispensationalism was actually became theology. People grew up with it. They believed it. They didn't know the Bible very well, but they knew late great planet Earth.
right. How Lindsay's late great
Yeah.
planet Earth, right?
Yeah.
Now, okay, so here we are, okay, and as you have one group, that's where we craft after reality, right? Or is reality being crafted after it? You have one group who believes that they are the bringers of the Messiah, which is the carry on for the Messianic age. And every time they've tried to bring in the millennial, the 1,000-year rule, they have unequivocally failed because people have stepped in the way of that, except for now. I'd say they're closer to it now, right? And then you have the other group who believes that that's an act of God, right? And so where we find Christians in the middle, I guess, is the idea that they don't see the one group bringing about the man who is the Messiah, which is them, right? It's the elite, or the Messiahs in a group, and I guess they don't recognize this, right? So they think that the God brought the Israelites back to from the diaspora, which doesn't really exist, and we can find evidence for that, to the promised land, right? And then all of a sudden, the promised land forward, like they talk about that. If you look at the average, or most Protestants still, but some Catholics are on that train. Is that they see this and they go, God brought all this together. So right now, following this group into how did the bringers of the man or human Messiah fool, I guess, to say, this question making sense, to fool the other group who believes the God is bringing us all together?
Well, it goes back to the Christians not understanding the idea of the Jewish Messiah. They don't understand that the Jewish concept of Messiah is really a political and military figure, not what they think at all. And there was a key shift that happened really after World War II. There are elements of it before that, but the prior to that, Christians generally believed that the Jews were going to be come to Christianity. After World War II, the common belief became that they were really they didn't have to convert. There was no emphasis on conversion. They were just a separate. Basically, they became a separate path.
Okay, so they're just separate paths. But how'd they fool the, I guess, Goyim there into following them and to thinking that everything that they do is actually an act of God?
Well, because there's some of their leaders told them that. The average Christian, especially in evangelical Christian dispensationalist, tends to think that Judaism and Christianity are virtually the same. Why do they think that? Because some key leaders taught them that. One guy, Olson, who was the leading Christian Zionist for about 10 years, actually said that the two faiths are the same, except for a small issue about who Jesus is. So they've been completely misled. And then also, if you mention anything that's inconvenient regarding Zionism or even Jewish history, you get blackballed. You're anti-Semite, and people don't like to be called that. Don't like to be called racist either. So they just quietly say nothing.
Yeah, but as many people said so many times before, is we're kind of done with those boomer categories there. Especially when you talk about people who aren't Semitic in any way, shape, or form, right? They're Eastern European. They speak a Hebrew language that's, for the most part, Western European.
Yeah, Germanic mainly.
Yeah, and it's like they speak Western languages. They are Eastern people, and that's the funny thing when people say, "Oh, you're anti-Semitic." It's like, no, because I'm not talking about Semitic people. And so it's, I guess what it comes down to, right, is that how our modern picture of this, right, and supporting the things that we have supported, to keep the East India Company alive, I should say, which is really what it is now. It's the consolidation. Is what? How would you summarize, our military? I guess our belief in that with the Zionist idea, if that makes sense. That makes sense.
Well, it's the only reason anybody would possibly consider supporting Israel, or especially dying for Israel, fighting for Israel. So we had a whole bunch of different reasons why we're doing this floated out here, and one of them that came out at operational level many, many, many times is we're doing this to usher in the second coming. Hard to believe that was, but that did happen. How common was it? I don't really know. But there are people in the White House around Trump that definitely believe this and preach it. There's a Pentecostal female preacher, Carla, I forget her last name. She's around Trump a lot. She's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I saw a clip of her essentially demanding money from her congregation.
Yeah.
Was mad when she didn't get it. But okay, I go back to the two different ideas. Is BB just came out today or yesterday, one of those two, and he said that we will survive until the Messiah comes, right? But then you have the Western country telling its military to, we're bringing about the second coming. Do people not see that one's trying to bring about a different Messiah than the other?
No, they don't. They don't grasp it at all. It's rather obvious, I think, but the Christian leaders don't teach it unless somebody's gonna really stop and look at it. They're just not getting it.
Now, with that, yeah, and would that say with the two different ideologies, fundamentally, you have to ask the question: are they believing in the same God, right? And
You do have to ask that question.
you
Yeah.
have the Yahweh factor. Which one does Yahweh belong to? And we know that Oranos is the word that Christ used, and Yahweh or Yahoo is the ones that the Jews use. So, at what point do we say different God, right? Different Messiah, than versus Christ and his second coming.
You have very different concepts of God, honestly. And I think people understood that more prior to the Reformation than they do now.
Yeah.
What happened gradually is you had a blending together of Talmudic Judaism, Kabbalah, and pseudo Christianity. So it became kind of meshed together, which was the whole point of Freemasonry, by the way.
Yeah, I just find it odd. It's that you got people like the Ted Cruz is leading I guess a fifth crusade here, and nobody don't have the average person hasn't yet stopped to go, maybe there's something weird here, right? But looking back at that, right, is it safe to assume that Zionism is not just the belief that Israel should survive as a country?
No, it's not that at all.
No, I
Yeah,
mean, is it safe to assume that? I'm sorry.
yeah, it's the belief that they control this vast greater Israel. And it's really a Jewish supremacist belief. Originally with Herzl and labor Zionism, he was relatively accepting to the idea that they were going to get a place in Africa. He died sort of early under questionable circumstances. Then that became a no-go, and the only right answer was Palestine after that. They believe, well, as you pointed out before, that us goyim have animal souls. We can be lied to, which we have been. And essentially, it's a whole philosophy of racial superiority. It's not about survival; it's about domination. Huckabee's a liar. He's either unbelievably stupid or a liar.
Well, when I looked back at that and I heard that comment, right, to me is that it's funny coming from someone from Arkansas, right? The last big name from Arkansas that we can readily recognize as doing something big in this world was Albert Pike, right? Who the man from Arkansas who was from New England, who was placed there by, I'm going to say Jewish money, because we need to recognize that it was the Forbes family who were aligned with the financial group, who created the man in Arkansas who didn't want to be there in the first place, but would have satanic orgies every weekend, right? And it just seems fair that in a way that Arkansas, the man from Arkansas, still is on board, as if the ghost of, or the soul of Albert Pike is still there, right? The 30.
Yeah, Pike was a creepy guy. I don't know. Arkansas should claim him or not. I wanted. You go back to New England where you came from.
Well, yeah, but they claim the Clintons too, so. So, yeah, I guess that when it comes down to Zionism, right, is that it's more than what people think it is, and we need to really understand that we need to ask the questions, the right questions. Why, right? The right questions. Who? What's the belief? Where does it come from? Is our pastors necessarily telling us the right things? I know that pastors like to say this is doctrine, this is scripture here, right? But then they go on about it. And so I think average people need to start asking the questions of does that make sense, or make that make sense in a way, right? Because here we are. Now, if I were to extend this question just one more time, because we started with the East India companies, right? We started with the English East India Company, the Dutch East India Company. And you see, right, in America, they took over the, Perkins Company, which is the Russell and Sons, and moved forward. What could we say? Because the world ran through who controlled the East Indies, the Indian Ocean trade. Could we classify this as yet another chapter in an East India experiment where all three of the companies essentially consolidated under this one brick and mortar prophetic messianic company?
The first president of Israel, Chaz Wiseman, said as much.
What did he say, if you could recall?
I don't have the quote where I can get it exactly, but he basically said, back in the day, we used to have the East India companies. We can't set up anything like that anymore now. And he said, well, principally because of Woodrow Wilson. Now we have to have the basically, as you put it, a brick and mortar place to operate out of.
Right. So when we look at the history of the East India companies and how they operate, right? And now I know that the Israel when they created their brick and mortar headquarters for the company, they didn't necessarily have the same things as the English and the Dutch had, right? Which was the military. So they got the Americans. They fooled the Americans into this one. Um, where was I going with this question? Oh, yeah. Should we be surprised at all the way that Israel treats those around them and the dissension that
No,
they
not
do?
not at all. Not
Right,
at
not
all.
at all. Especially if we write, a lot of people write papers on how awful the English East India Company, and the Dutch East India Company was, and people try to dabble with Perkins. But the question is like the English East India Company, who essentially established, they worked through the establishment. You have Balfour and all them. It's like they pitted the elite classes against each other, right? So they didn't unite against them. They constantly waged war, famine, and other things against the people around them to make sure that the company stayed in power. And even when those places were dying or there was no return on investment, they still kept going and going and going, right? It's like when we look at Israel, we should understand that that has all the hallmarks of an East India company. Nothing's different just because they have a quote unquote government, which is really ran by a board of advisors that's at the elite level, which is the Rothschilds and that group, right? Same thing with behind our government, is that it's like this is that next chapter in those companies, and they're still chasing the same thing. They're chasing the Messiah. They're chasing the rule to make sure a landed empire has nothing and they own everything. They're sea people. They
Yeah,
export.
there's two people. They're very much like the East India Company. And an interesting thing about the Messiah, they always believe that the Messiah comes after a time of great trial. So the idea of war and Messiah goes together.
Okay, so we're gonna move on here, but I'm gonna last question on this topic is Christians in the 90 AD, right before we had that last book added, right, is they asked the question of, huh, he hasn't returned yet. At what point, and I know this is people are gonna get mad, and I'm gonna ask the question because I want to, is at what point do we recognize that this prophecy has been rewritten multiple times? The second coming has been, this is going to happen here, 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 and here, and yet it doesn't. But we hang on to the idea that tomorrow is going to be the day, right? Our heaven is waiting for us, and that we shouldn't care about this world. We should just know that our cabin up in heaven on the lake and the streets of gold is waiting. And it's like, at what point do we say maybe Jesus said the kingdom of Oronos is here now, build it right here, this is it, and that's through the heart. And when do we stop saying we got to wait and wage war and control this and do that and murder them, and Christ will come back and be happy that we did that?
Well, Augustine taught that the kingdom of God was not of this world. And strangely, that's kind of it can be. I see it as being kind of similar to the idea that the kingdom of God is not of this world, but in a spiritual sense, it's here and now, and it always is. Um, the idea of the kingdom of God being um, a government in the world, basically a rule of the kingdom of saints of one form or another, Jewish or Christian. Um, that disappeared from Christianity in the second century. During the first century, there were people that generally have a Jewish background that believed that, and then there were others that didn't. Justin Martyr wrote about it, where he said they're both factions. Um, After the second century, it disappeared. Millennialism was considered to be a uh, a dangerous heresy. and then it reappeared a couple generations after the Reformation. Although you saw it even right initially. What were the Anabaptists? What were the peasant? What were the people driving the peasant revolts? They were millennialists.
Yeah, they were, and that they keep pushing that because it gives them power, and that's my big thing is that people are blind to power when it's through prophecy.
It gives desperate people hope, and it gives
And
uh,
this is
the people leading them power. Yeah.
and for those idiot neocons out there who want to keep spouting this garbage, this is what Nietzsche said when God is dead, then the church has killed him, and there's not enough, essentially, that you've not enough mops to pick the blood up, right? As Nietzsche
Yeah.
said, you guys have killed it. Done. We got to figure out how to move forward and without it and establish these these principles that were once here. I know people think, oh, we shouldn't have that. They take Nietzsche, but even Fyodor Dostoevsky said that.
Yeah, so you make good points there. That statement by Nietzsche is not is generally misused and not understood correctly.
Yeah, and so my point with Fyodor Dostoevsky is it's like that's a balance yourself, perfect yourself, and that's how you bring about this kingdom. Is that when everyone starts perfecting their problems, balancing their life, and moving forward towards perfection, which is what Christ said in Matthew 5:48, "Be perfect as my heavenly Father is perfect." Right? Is that it's like when do we start saying that the human, the man, can be perfect and that we should stop trying to search for other ways to come by that and now the common thing is man's can't be perfect and so I don't know it just that's where I'm at with that one right
All right.
so let's move forward real quick we got a few minutes here some
All right.
time which is great is let's ask the question right Trump in his inauguration he gave this beautiful speech that he didn't write. He let other people write for him and decide the words. And he said, sitting there on that podium, he said, I want my legacy to be a peacemaker and unifier. Right. And I know that that was double speak. There was something else more to what he was trying to say when he had his whole America First in the Globe thing at Davos. But how do we get from there now to we're looking at essentially a clusterfuck in Iran and even Israel, right? Who greatly misunderstood what was going to happen. How do we get from one to the other?
Well, he was very dependent on big dollar, principally Jewish Zionist donors. I think he always kind of said things like, "Oh, these other people ahead of me were good negotiators." So his idea of peace might be peace based on my threats and intimidation of other world leaders. What he's found is they're not so intimidated. In the case of the war right now, he's obviously looking for an off ramp. Might realize deep inside he's made a terrible mistake, but the U.S. isn't going to determine how this war ends, and we can claim that we won as much as we want. We did it. This will go down in history as a decisive defeat as it stands right now. Iran's going to determine how this ends.
Right, and that's the one thing. So if we look at Trump, who beats his chest, and I will be all rude and ridiculous. I'm gonna say ridiculous. And no, it's not Trump derangement syndrome. That's just the truth. It's the facts. Is looking at him. Is did he really think that he was gonna thump his chest and send two of the worst vile creatures to negotiate? You have Jared Kushner, who derailed his first administration, and Witkoff, who is someone that is fully both of them are fully supportive of Israel and the world.
And they have no diplomatic background, completely unqualified for what they were in. I don't know. Trump, I'm going to say I supported Trump in 2016. As soon as he said that the wars in the Middle East were just dumb, he said they were wrong. I said, man, that guy's got my vote. This is a epic betrayal of many of the people that supported him, who knew what neocons were and understood him not to be one. He has been the biggest neocon they ever could have found. You either have to question his intelligence, or you have to consider him as being somehow captured. This is the greatest change of face politically I have ever seen, for sure.
So I'm gonna we'll talk about capture real quick, and then we'll talk about Trump's off ramp, which is humiliation of himself. Is that I think looking back at the fact that he was hit in the ear, right, is that was a warning shot to look what we could do, right? You get in there, you're gonna win. Get in there, and then you're gonna follow us because next time it won't be your ear.
I don't know, maybe.
Maybe. Anyway, so we'll look at
That's such a fine line, man.
yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna say that we could start piecing evidence for that because looking at how this turned out. But Trump's off ramp. This is the off ramp so far that we've got that we're gonna look at to get out of this war. He has, according to the Iranians. I keep saying that wrong. I'm not Iranians. Iranians. Is that he has to hand Netanyahu to the ICC, has to withdraw to the October 7th borders, has to cancel Trump's Gaza plan, has to lift all sanctions and return frozen funds, has to recognize Iran's nuclear rights, has to leave Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen, has to evacuate all U.S. bases from Arab soil. Trump must publicly apologize to Khamenei and compensate Iran for every sanction ever imposed. That is
Well, clearly that's a negotiating position, and Trump would laugh at that right now. But it didn't make any sense. Iran basically has reached a point where they couldn't have a another pseudo peace and have everything go back to the way it was. And by the way, that's kind of relates to Russia and Ukraine as well. This is going to end in such a way that there are no U.S. bases over there. They're not going to go back to being surrounded like that, and the sanctions are going to be gone. And I'd say those are probably their two minimalist positions. They might throw something in like a guarantee regarding nuclear weapons. They've shown they don't need them, but that's the best case for the U.S. out of this, and it's probably going to take a lot more pain for us to realize that that's the way this is going to end up.
Okay, so that's kind of the only off ramp that we're looking at is that a lot of the stuff that we've established there is no longer going to be there. So the question is that I know Tucker had floated around the idea that Israel wants America out of there, and I this is where I believe.
Oh, right, they do, yeah.
Yeah, but this is where I believe that Tucker doesn't really understand the conflict. I should say, is that an East India company without a military to survive it is no longer viable, useful, or will exist longer than, I would say, from anywhere from a week to a decade, that they will be out of there and they will be reduced down to exactly what everybody else is around them, and the company will be gone. And, we could say Bibi will go back home to Florida. And so did Israel, in a sense, if they wanted that, they wanted America gone, did they understand what comes with our military or American military being gone?
I don't know, actually. Netanyahu had said that he wants to be militarily self-sufficient within, I think, 10 years. Now, the thing about the Sea People, they're a lot better at controlling other folks than they are at actually producing anything. That would be an absolutely incredible undertaking. I think they overplayed their hand dramatically. But they're never going to have a better hand to play.
This was the only hand they had.
It's the only hand, the only time they had to do what they did now. But I think analytically, they had no chance of success. The only thing I can say is they don't understand fundamentally what's changed in modern warfare. That a drone and missile war, C4 ISR, a managed war is way different from what you had in in World War II.
Yeah. That's the thing. I think that there's, I guess, the other option of it, if they want America out, is that would they hope that the other, the East would, descend upon Israel, and that'd be another aspect of the, divinity return of the Messiah in a sense. But yeah, they overestimated or underestimated what Iran could do, and they overestimated their ability because Israel couldn't survive on their own. Right? They
Right. No, not right now.
without our money, they don't
No.
produce anything to make money. And see, people don't invest, I guess, in things that aren't really, that they can't steal from. And if there's nothing to steal from in Israel, what else do? You kind of, that's it.
Merchant societies always destroy whatever their host is and eventually collapse on their own.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, that we will. That's all we got for today, folks. We will be back next week. I know we've kind of had 2 weeks off, but we're gonna go back to the every Thursday. We're gonna rock and roll. And we're gonna talk about this week. We came back with more history, and I think that's kind of what we want to start doing, is tying in history, these conflicts, and Zionism was something that I wanted to really talk about. Because people don't understand what it is, what they believe in, and how we got to where we are, and we have to understand history. It's relevant. It's relevant for your everyday life, for your past life, and the era you project forward. And so we're going to start to do that more often. I ask that you like, subscribe, share, comments, anything else. Go to Substack, go to Rumble, go to X. Start following us, because we're gonna bring information that you're gonna want to hear on a weekly basis, and it's going to greatly enlighten you. At least it may not be 100% enlightening, but it may be enough for you to start moving forward and asking the question you need to ask, and go research the questions that you need to research, and extend what we say to your own interests, I should say. And so we do have things coming here. We got hats that are going to show up. We're going to have some cups. We got some pins showing up. Shirts. We're kind of in the mix for shirts right now. And so within the next couple of weeks, we're going to start to have merch that will be available for you to buy. If you want a cool hat that says "Unite the Goyim and Amalek, the Dissenting Goyim Show," we will have that for you, reasonably priced, for you to support the show, to keep our lights on, to keep us moving, keep our information flowing through the airwaves, and to join the Dissenting Goyim Club here. We appreciate you tuning in. Again, like, subscribe, share, comment. Go to Rumble, Substack, X, whatever those sites are. We are on them, and we're constantly looking for more fans, more subscriptions. Not because we want the money, but because we want people to sit here and tune in, because we got some information you want to hear. So thank you. We appreciate your time. We will see you next week.